Bajari, Gumarawa. I thought all that applause was for me, but it's for our gorgeous guest speaker. Yaradumarang Yuntu, Norma Ingram, Galia Wiradjuri. So good evening, everybody. I've just said hello, welcome to all of you in the local Aboriginal Gadigal language and also my language. So I'm actually from over the Blue Mountains, Wiradjuri. Some of you may know a little town called Cowra. That's my mother's traditional lands, and I can trace my ancestry right back actually to Windradine and further, who was one of our freedom fighters at the time of Captain Arthur Phillip. So this evening it is my great responsibility to welcome you to Aboriginal land. And I do that with the greatest of respect, and knowing with that I do have a responsibility. As I said, I'm Norma Ingram, and I belong to the longest continuous practice culture on this entire planet. And all of us Australians, we can say that with pride. I certainly do, as a First Nations person, as a woman, as an Aboriginal woman. And I just love this country. And it gives me great pride when we do acknowledge traditional lands. Where we are this evening is we are on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people. And aren't we all proud that we can say that we can be on traditional lands? There's something come out here, I don't know what it is. And the Gadigal people are one of 29 small clan groups of the Eora Nation. And we have about 200 or more Aboriginal nations or language groups right across this country. The Eora bounded natural boundaries by the Hawkesbury River to the north, the Nepean River, and of course the Georges River to the south. So the Eora peoples, and particularly the Gadigal, and our local clan groups around this wonderful, gorgeous, beautiful harbour, they were here right from the dream time. Some people can say 60,000 years. Folks, that really doesn't mean anything to me, because we have been here since the beginning of time and will continue to be here. We are not out of Africa. We don't have elephants and giraffes in our Dreamtime stories. We have stories like how did the kangaroo lose his tail. So all of our Dreamtime stories is acknowledgement of this great land and who we are. And the Gadigal looked after this land, looked after the waterways. They are saltwater, and their dreaming is the whale or the gurrawal. I'm freshwater, and my totem is the goanna. So welcome to country is very much a very strong part of Aboriginal culture. And I'm sure there are people here from overseas who would distinctively know in their own country, if they looked at a piece of Aboriginal art, they would know it's from Australia. If they looked at a dance, they would know it's from Australia. So welcome to country is about paying respect, acknowledging that longevity of who we are as Aboriginal people and our responsibility to take care of the land, to take care of culture, and to take care of our people. I want to also acknowledge elders. The elders were custodians. Aboriginal people are custodians of this land. We don't own the land. The land owns us. And the gorgeous young man who won the New South Wales of Australia, Australian of the Year the other night said, it's not that we're born in Australia, Australia's born in us. And so if you look at it in that concept that we can't get away from this, it will be here forever. And it doesn't matter how long and how many generations we are here. As custodians, we will continue to make sure that we look after our place and our culture. I want to pay respect to elders, Aboriginal elders who've gone before us, our elders who are here now as custodians who set the footprint. They are our mentors, our teachers. And they also have a responsibility, as I do, to pass on what we know about culture onto our next generation, our future elders. But we also have a responsibility to pass it on you, Australians, and any visitors that come to our shores. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge traditional lands, Aboriginal people, if there are any Aboriginal people here tonight, and I want to acknowledge our Senator, Patrick Dodson. We're very proud of our Aboriginal people who are in Parliament, because it can't be easy. And they are there as well to teach others and to set those rules and help set those standards. So, as I said, we're very proud, and we're very proud of all of our politicians, wherever they are in this country, because it's not easy. And so I just want to say welcome everybody, wherever you've come from. I wish you a safe journey on your travels home, wherever that may be, wherever that's close here in Sydney, across our ancient lands, or overseas. I want to welcome you to Aboriginal country, to Gadigal lands. And may our spiritual ancestors walk with you on these, whilst you're on these ancient lands. I wish you well, and I wish your family well. And what I say is, we don't say goodbye, we say Guwayu. We will see you later. Welcome everybody, and enjoy your evening.
He was carried from the water by a soldier, and the picture screams 1,000 different words. He was running from the terror with his father, who once believed that nothing could be worse. So he'd handed a man 2,000 precious dollars, the way you'd rest a bird in a lion's open jaw. And he told the boys that Canada was waiting, that there was hope upon her golden shores. But at night he said a quiet prayer into the wind. Oh, Canada, if you can hear me now, won't you open up your arms towards the sea? Oh, my Canada, if you could help me out, all I ever wanted was a safe place for my family. Well, the days were long, but the nights were even longer, and the baby boys never left their mother's side. But the boat was small and the waves were getting stronger, and they began to fear they'd not survive. So the father said, we gotta hold each other tighter. I'm not losing everything I left tonight. And we come so far, I know that out there somewhere there's a place we won't have to fear for our lives. But as he held onto the side of the boat, he looked up at the sky. Oh, Canada, if you can hear me now, won't you open up your arms towards the sea? Oh, my Canada, if you could help me out, the sea is churning and I think we're going There's a million ways to justify your fear. There's a million ways to measure out your worth. But the body of a lamb being laid upon the sand will tell me, how do we live with that? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 19th City of Sydney Peace Prize Lecture. My name is David Hirsch, and I'm the chair of the Sydney Peace Foundation. Thank you to Norma Ingram for her Welcome to Country. Thank you also to Missy Higgins for O Canada, which resonates on so many levels today. You will have seen on the screen above an impressive array of the past winners of the Sydney Peace Prize. Each was recognized for their contributions to the progressive values that the Sydney Peace Foundation aims to promote: peace with justice, respect for human rights, and the language and practice of nonviolence. Promoting progressive values has always been an uphill battle. This week, that hill has gotten a lot steeper. Last Sunday, we presented a documentary film of Naomi Klein's book on the climate crisis, This Changes Everything. We presented it to a capacity crowd at the University of Sydney. It's a confronting film about the destruction caused by the fossil fuel extractive industries and the governments that they control. It's also about how ordinary people have been fighting back. The director of the film, who is Naomi Klein's husband, Avi Lewis, was asked about their motivation in a project that took 7 years to complete. And he explained that the hope of creating a better world is what kept them going. He said, hope was a decision. Despair was an indulgence. The message of This Changes Everything is that when people make the decision to stand up for what is right, and when they stand up together, the hope of change can become a reality. I look out over this capacity crowd at the Sydney Town Hall tonight, and it's gratifying to think that you have all made a decision to come out here because you want to stand up for a change. We have a very full program tonight, and I want to talk you through what's going to happen. In a moment, Senator Patrick Dodson will speak with you and will introduce Naomi Klein. Naomi will speak for about 40 minutes, and after that, Professor Gillian Triggs, who is the president of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Professor Triggs will present this handsome trophy here, which is the Sydney Peace Prize, designed by Sydney glass artist Brian Hurst. She will present that to Naomi. We will then hear from Councillor Jess Scully, who will say a few words on behalf of the City of Sydney, and after that we have an audio-visual surprise. After the surprise, Missy Higgins will be back to close the evening. A recurring theme in This Changes Everything is the role of Indigenous communities in the climate crisis. There would be few people better placed to speak to us about the Indigenous perspective of the climate crisis than Patrick Dodson. Patrick Dodson was awarded the Sydney Peace Prize in 2008. He was recognized for his courageous advocacy of the human rights of Indigenous people and for distinguished leadership of the reconciliation movement. Earlier this year, the Western Australian Parliament voted to make Patrick Dodson a senator and to send him off to Canberra, where he could take his progressive message, our progressive message, to the Australian Parliament. Patrick Dodson is thoughtful, principled, and inspiring. the qualities that the Sydney Peace Foundation always looks for in a Peace Prize winner. I dare say it is much needed in Canberra, where thoughtfulness, principle, and inspiration are, shall we say, elusive. Would you please join me in welcoming Senator Patrick Dodson?
Thank you for such a wonderful welcome, and what a wonderful occasion this is. And I want to acknowledge the welcome that we received from Norma to these lands of the Eora people, the Gadigal people, and for whelping, sounds like I was just out of the Senate. But, I'll tell you about that in a sec. But look, I want to acknowledge David Hirsch for the work that the Sydney Peace Foundation does. And tonight's a great testimony to the work that goes on in society to help get the message around that human beings matter, environment matters, and how we behave towards each other and to the environment is absolutely critical to our sustainability on this earth. I want to acknowledge Professor Julian Triggs, who is under an enormous amount of pressure from some of the worst right-wing political operators I've ever seen in my life in this country. And I also acknowledge Jess Scully, who's here for the Lord Mayor. I know who would be here if she could be. And if there are other celebrities and dignitaries and politicians in the mix, I acknowledge you as well. But mostly I acknowledge all of you who've come, because there's a concept that the Yawuru have that talks about Mabu Buru. Mabu means good and Buru means land or country. I've tried to get this concept across in the Parliament, but it's taken me some time. And tonight we have a very, very special person who has seen the connectivity not only of human beings to human beings, of different cultures and political persuasions, but who've seen human beings' relationship to the natural resources of the world and seen the rapacious nature with which some seek to drive and exploit those resources to the detriment not only of us as human beings, but to the world itself, to place it completely at risk. And that's, of course, our special guest, Naomi Klein, the winner of the Sydney Peace Prize. But more than that, a valiant warrior in the world where it's so difficult for people to hear and listen to what it is you're trying to get across about the uniqueness of the world. I went to Kiribati some time ago out in the Pacific and saw the struggle of people who are dealing with the effects of climate change because of the sea rising and the threat to their home and to their culture. And then within a month or so I went to San Francisco and the contrast was enormous. Cars, huge developments. And I thought about the people from Kiribati and the little frigate bird that they'd use as a symbol of the search for a home whilst flying across vast oceans to search for land to rest and to be at peace. And I often wonder, what is it about us as humans that has detached us almost, except for Indigenous peoples in the main and very dedicated people to the environment, but what has detached us from the land, from its living being, from our very essence, our connectivity to it? And the image that often comes to my mind is how most of us have been socialised, particularly if you've got a Christian background, through the story of Adam and Eve. And that particular story has many sorts of versions that people extract from it. But for me, if you understood the apple as all of the resources of the world, all of those essential ingredients to sustain us, water, air, beautiful countrysides, and other sorts of elements. If you saw the apple as symbolising those factors, and then you look at humans who have a common humanity, but who are diverse by virtue of culture, and you wonder what the story is really about, because they were in a pristine environment until the simplicity of the story of the apple emerged, and then they were cast out. And the relationship, the connectivity between humans, the environment, and whoever has been responsible for the creation of these things, in whichever traditions we belong to, was also severed. And of course, people have got different sorts of stories about how they restore the relationship, how to restore the harmony between humans and the harmony of humans with creation. And ultimately, if you believe in a creator or some spirit greater than ourselves, the relationship with that particular spirit. If you talk like that in a boardroom of a corporation, they'd probably have you certified. And if you talk like that in the Parliament of Australia, they'd probably have you certified as well. But that's the quintessence of what we are faced with, and the urgency of us to come back to the Mother Earth, to re-fall in love with the earth and to caress it in a way that gives us life as well as gives life to the earth. And in that way we help regenerate those constructive things about us as human beings. Now tonight it's my very special privilege to welcome someone of the stature of Naomi Klein, who has grappled with all of these sorts of elements in a far more sophisticated and in-depth manner than I've tried to present in a simple story and a new version of Adam and Eve. But it is about connectivity at the essence of it, and how we impact each other through our stupidity, or through our avariciousness and our greed, and through our desire for more and more, rather than coming to terms with developing the capacities of resilience and sustainability. So please, you've come to listen to a great person who's making a great contribution to the world, and so pleased that she's in our country, and who's the recipient of the Sydney Peace Prize. Please welcome Naomi Klein.
My goodness. Hi. Thank you, Senator Dodson. It is such an honor to be introduced by you. Thank you for your words and wisdom. I assure you this will be much less sophisticated. I must say that I also have to praise you for your courage in the Senate. I've had run-ins with a few of your senators on Twitter. You are a brave soul. I would like to pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land we gather. Norma, thank you for that beautiful and inspiring welcome to country. And David, Hirsch, and everybody at the Sydney Peace Prize, I am so tremendously honored to be here, and I want to extend a special thanks to the members of the jury. There's just an incredible group of people who I'm sharing the stage with tonight, and I'm so excited about it. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your busy schedules. I want to acknowledge and thank my husband, Avi Lewis, my great collaborator in all things, and our 4-year-old son, Toma, wearing his very first suit, is here somewhere tonight. He may make himself known, and for that, I apologize. I want to thank our dear friend and collaborator, Alex Kelly, an amazing filmmaker, artist, and activist who has introduced me to so many amazing people in Australia. I also want to acknowledge the many land and water warriors in this room fighting to protect territory from coal mining, fracking, and oil drilling, the lands that you love and cherish, and as you protect your lands, protecting the planet as a whole from disastrous warming in the process. There are heroes among us. I was making notes for this lecture and thinking a lot about it over the past couple of weeks. And I knew that I really should be preparing 2 versions, the Hillary wins version and the Trump wins version. But there was a part of me that rebelled. I just couldn't bring myself to write the Trump wins version. My typing fingers went on strike. And in retrospect, I was derelict in my duties, and I apologize if what follows seems rushed. It is rushed because it is. It is a hot take, as they call it, on this hot planet. If there is a single overarching lesson in the Trump victory, perhaps it is this: never, ever underestimate the power of hate, of direct appeals to power over the other, the migrant, the Muslim, blacks, us ladies, especially during times of economic hardship. Because when large numbers of white men find themselves hurting and insecure, and those men were raised in a social system built on elevating their humanity over the humanity of others, a lot of them get mad. And there's nothing wrong with being mad. There's lots to be legitimately mad at. But within a culture that so systematically elevates some lives over other lives, anger makes these men and some women putty in the hands of whatever demagogue of the moment is offering to win back the illusion of dominance, however fleeting. Build a wall, lock them up, deport them all for life, grab them wherever you like, show them who's boss. What other lessons can we take from our barely 3-day-old reality that we now live in a world with a president-elect Donald Trump? One lesson: that the economic pain is real and not going anywhere. 4 decades of corporate neoliberal policies of privatization, deregulation, free trade, and austerity had made sure of that. Another lesson: leaders who represent that failed consensus are no match for the demagogues and neo-fascists. They have nothing tangible to offer, and they are seen quite correctly as being the people responsible for much of the pain. Only a bold and genuinely redistributive agenda has a hope of speaking to that pain and directing it where it belongs. The politician purchasing elites who benefited so extravagantly from the auctioning off of public wealth, the polluting of our land, water, and air, and the deregulation of the financial sphere. But there is a deeper lesson that we must urgently learn from this week's bombshell. If we want to defend against the likes of Donald Trump, and every country has their own Trump, we must urgently confront and battle racism and misogyny in our culture and in our movements and in ourselves. This cannot be an afterthought. It cannot be an add-on. It is central to how someone like Trump could rise to power. Many people said they voted for him despite his objectionable views and pronouncements on race and gender. They liked what he had to say about trade and bringing back manufacturing, and that he wasn't a Washington insider. But that doesn't cut it, because you cannot cast a ballot for someone who is riling up race, gender, and physical ability-based hatreds unless, on some level, you think those issues aren't important, that those lives matter less than yours. You can't do it unless you're willing to sacrifice the other for your gain. Neither can we tell ourselves that when we fight for peace and economic justice, it will benefit Black people and Indigenous people the most because they are the most victimized in our current system of economic equality and state repression and climate change. There is too long and too painful a track record of left and liberal movements leaving workers of color and Indigenous people and women and their labor out in the cold. To build a truly inclusive movement, there needs to be a truly inclusive vision that starts with and is led by the most brutalized and excluded. Ronaldo Walcott, a great Canadian writer and intellectual, issued a challenge a couple of months ago to white liberals and leftists like me. And I'd like to quote from it at length. He wrote, "Black people are dying in our cities, crossing oceans in resource wars, not of our making. Indeed, it is obvious that Black people's lives are disposable in a way and fashion that is radically different from other groups globally. It is from this stark reality of marginalization that I want to propose that any new policy actions in the North American context ought to pass what I call the Black test. The Black test is simple. It demands that any policy meet the requirement of ameliorating the dire condition of Black people's lives. When a policy does not meet this test, then it is a failed policy from the first instant of its proposal." That's worth thinking hard about. I know that my work has not always passed that test and indeed has failed. But now more than ever, I know that those of us who talk about peace and justice and equality must rise to this challenge. When it comes to climate action, it is absolutely clear that we will not build the kind of power necessary to win unless we embed justice, particularly racial, but also gender, social, and economic justice, at the center of our low-carbon policies. Intersectionality. Intersectionality, as the kids these days call it, is the only path forward. We cannot play my crisis is more urgent than your crisis. War trumps climate, climate trumps class, class trumps gender, gender trumps race. That trumping game, my friends, is how you end up with a Trump. Either we fight for a future in which everyone belongs, starting with those most battered by injustice today, or we keep losing, and there is no time for that. Moreover, when we make these connections among issues, climate, capitalism, colonialism, slavery, there's a kind of relief, because it actually is all connected, all part of the same story, which is why I've called my lecture here tonight Captain Cook's Climate. I was feeling this very intensely last week when I visited the Great Barrier Reef, and some of you may have seen the short film that we made with a terrific team from Guardian Australia. Floating in the waters off of Port Douglas and looking at a whole lot of bleached and dead coral, I found myself thinking, as one does in those parts, about Captain Cook, partly because everything's named after him. Thinking about all of these forces that came together right at the exact time that the Endeavour navigated those waters and almost sank on a coral reef. As all of you good students of Australian history know, Cook arrived in Queensland in 1770. And it's interesting to note that just 6 years later, the Watt steam engine was put on the market, a breakthrough technology that massively accelerated the Industrial Revolution, now powered by the potent combination of slave labor in the colonies and the power of coal through the Watt steam engine. That same year, 1776, Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, the textbook for contemporary capitalism. Colonialism, slavery, coal, capitalism, all tightly bound up together, creating the modern world. This country called Australia was born precisely at the dawn of fossil-fueled capitalism. We should connect the dots because the dots are connected. The land grabs, climate change, and the economic and social theories that have rationalized all of this. We are all living in a very real sense in Captain Cook's climate. One detail that I found really interesting in my research for this lecture is that the HMS Endeavour didn't start its life as a Navy vessel, tasked with unlocking astrological and biological mysteries, and in its spare time claiming vast swaths of territory for the British Crown without Indigenous consent. No. The Endeavour was built in 1764 to haul coal through British waterways. When the Navy purchased it, it had to be radically retrofitted to be suited for Cook and Banks's globe-trotting voyage. And it does seem fitting in a way that the ship that laid claim to vast swaths of what is now Australia started life as a coal vessel. Is it any wonder your government has an unnatural love affair with coal? Is it any wonder that as the catastrophe unfolds on the Great Barrier Reef, one of the wonders of the world, this has not caused in any way the government in Queensland to rethink its crusade for new coal projects? As Vandana Shiva said when she accepted this prize 6 years ago, the roots of our crisis lie in an economy which fails to respect ecological and ethical limits. Limits. Limits are a problem for our economic system. Ours is a culture of endless taking, as if there was no end to what can be taken and no consequences for the taking, a culture of grabbing and going, and now this grab and go culture has reached, perhaps, its logical conclusion. The most powerful nation on earth has elected itself a grabber-in-chief, a man who openly brags about grabbing women without their consent, who says about the invasion of Iraq, we should have taken their oil, international law be damned. This rampant grabbing, of course, is not just a Trump thing. We have an epidemic of grabbing, land grabbing, resource grabbing, even grabbing the sky by polluting so much that there is no atmospheric space left over for the poor. And now we are hitting the wall of maximum grabbing. That's what climate change is telling us. That's what our endless wars and the huge displacement of people is telling us. And maybe that's what Trump is telling us too. That it's time to put everything we have into shifting from this culture of endless taking to a culture based on caretaking and beginning to repair the damage. Caring for the planet, or caring for country, as you say here, and caring for one another. It's so good to be with you during these difficult times. It's a good time to gather. When I learned that I had been awarded the Sydney Peace Prize for my work on climate change, I was incredibly honored. This is a prize that has gone to some of my personal heroes, Arundhati Roy, Noam Chomsky, Vandana, as I mentioned, Desmond Tutu, among so many others. It's a very nice tribe to be a part of. So I was thrilled to receive the call. But after that wore off a bit, the doubts surfaced. One was, why me? My writing builds on the work of so many thousands of climate justice activists around the world, many of whom have been at it for much longer than me and never been recognized for their work. Another doubt was more practical. Can I really justify the transportation pollution required to accept an award for doing my bit to fight pollution? And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure I can justify it. But I consulted with Australian friends and colleagues, and they pointed out that your government is the #1 coal exporter in the world, selling directly to those countries whose emissions are growing most rapidly, and that you are well on your way to playing the same leadership role for liquefied natural gas. Even as other countries freeze and wind down their coal production, your Prime Minister is defiant. He says the plan is to stay the course with coal, quote, for many, many decades to come. That's long past time when we all need to be off that dirty fuel if the Paris climate goals have any chance of being met. Now, Australia really is standing out among wealthy industrialized nations for this defiance, for this aggressive pursuit of new fossil fuel frontiers. Canada, under our last Prime Minister, used to provide some rather unhealthy competition in this arena, but now Justin Trudeau, our hot new Prime Minister, is at least saying the right things, if not doing enough of them. Earlier this week, I said that Australia stands increasingly alone in raising its sooty middle finger to the world. Unfortunately, I now have to amend that statement. Starting in January, when Donald Trump moves into the White House, Turnbull will have some company. Ouch. The Australian friends whom I consulted told me that having the megaphone that comes with this prize might help support their work, crucial work to stop new fossil fuel projects like the gargantuan Carmichael coal mine in Wangan and Jangalingu territory, and many of the people at the forefront of that fight are here tonight, and I think they deserve a round of applause. Crucial fights to stop the Northern Gas Pipeline, which would open up vast areas of the Northern Territory to industrial fracking. This resistance is of global importance because these mega projects are massive pools of carbon that we now call unburnable carbon. Carbon dioxide and methane that, if extracted and burned, will not only blow past Australia's paltry climate commitments, but blow through the global carbon budget as well. And the math on this is very clear. In Paris, our governments, even yours, agreed to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius while pursuing efforts to limit temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And getting 1.5 in there was a huge victory for low-lying island states who fought incredibly hard for that. That goal, and it's an ambitious one, places all of humanity within the confines of a carbon budget. That's the total amount of carbon that can be emitted if we want to have a fighting chance of meeting those targets. And what we now know, thanks to breakthrough research from Oil Change International in Washington, D.C., is that if we burn all the oil, gas, and coal that is currently in production in coal mines and oil and gas fields, we would very likely pass 2 degrees of warming and certainly pass 1.5. What we cannot do under any circumstances is precisely what the fossil fuel industry is determined to do and what your government is so intent on helping them to do. dig new coal mines, open new fracking fields, and sink new offshore drilling rigs. All of that carbon needs to stay in the ground. The fossil fuel frontier is closed. What we must do is carefully wean ourselves off of those existing fossil fuel projects at the same time as we rapidly ramp up renewables until we get to 100% well before mid-century. The good news is that we can do it with existing technologies. Prices are dropping incredibly quickly. The good news is that we can create millions of jobs around the world. As we shift to a post-carbon economy, they can be well-paying jobs, they can be unionized jobs in renewables, in public transit, in efficiency, in retrofits, in cleaning up polluted lands and water. The best news is that as we transform how we generate energy and how we move ourselves around, we have a once-in-a-century opportunity to build a society that is fairer than what we have right now and where everyone is valued. We can put justice at the center of that transition. Here are a few ideas of how we do it. We make sure that wherever possible, our renewable energy comes from community-controlled providers and cooperatives so that decisions about land use and how to spend the profits are made democratically by communities, and that those resources are used to pay for much-needed services. If we fight austerity and climate change at the same time. We know that our reliance on dirty energy over the past couple hundred years has taken its highest toll on the poorest and most vulnerable people, overwhelmingly people of color, many indigenous. That's whose land has been stolen and poisoned by mining. That's who gets the most polluted refineries and power plants in their backyards. So we can and must insist that Indigenous people and other frontline communities be first in line to receive public funds to own and control their own green energy projects with the jobs, skills, and profits staying in their communities. A few months ago, the movement for Black Lives that came out of the Black Lives Matter street protests in the United States released a sweeping platform called Vision for Black Lives, and it's filled with specific policies that get at the root of the many forms of violence visited on Black bodies. And it includes many of these core climate justice ideas, and I encourage all of you to take a look at it and see what it inspires. Climate justice also means that workers in high carbon sectors, many of whom have sacrificed their health in coal mines and oil refineries, must be full and democratic participants in this justice-based transition. And over the past couple of days in Canberra, the Australian trade union movement has been meeting to plot and plan for precisely this kind of transition. Here are a couple of examples of what we're seeing in my country. There's a group of oil workers in the Alberta tar sands. You've all seen the images of just how destructive that industrial project is. They've started an organization called Iron and Earth, and they're calling on our government to retrain them and put them back to work installing solar panels, starting with public buildings like schools. It's a great idea, and everybody supports it as soon as they hear it. Our postal workers union has been facing a push to shut down their offices, restrict mail delivery, maybe even sell them off to FedEx, austerity and privatization as usual. But instead of just fighting for the best deal under this failed logic, they've put together a visionary plan for every post office in the country to become a hub for the green transition, a place where you can recharge electric vehicles, do an end run around the big banks, get a loan to start an energy co-op. Their entire fleet would be of delivery trucks would not only be electric and made in Canada, but would deliver more than the mail. It would deliver locally grown produce and check in on the elderly. These are bottom-up These are bottom-up, democratically conceived plans for a justice-based transition off of fossil fuels. and we need them multiplied around the world. Sounds pricey? Good thing we live in a time of unprecedented private wealth. For starters, we can and must take the profits from the dying days of fossil fuels and spend them on climate justice. We know that fossil fuel companies knew about climate change back in the 70s. They can pay for the mess they knowingly created and will use the profits to subsidize free public transit and affordable renewable energy to help poor nations leapfrog over fossil fuels and go straight to renewables, to support migrants displaced from their lands by oil wars, bad trade deals, drought, and other worsening impacts of climate change, as well as the poisoning of their lands by mining companies, many of them based in places like Australia and Canada. And we can also spend it on the sectors that are already low carbon. And here I'm not talking about the usual green tech fields, because we often forget that teaching is low carbon, that caring for the sick is low carbon, that making art is low carbon, that public interest media is low carbon. Let's invest in the caring economy. Let's invest in those sectors, the ones that tangibly improve quality of life and create kinder societies, instead of hacking away at these sectors in the name of a manufactured crisis called austerity. We can get clean, we have to get fair. More than that, as we get clean, we can begin to redress the founding crimes of our nations: land theft, genocide, slavery, yes, the hardest stuff. Because we haven't just been procrastinating climate action all of these years. We've been procrastinating and delaying the most basic demands for justice and reparation, and we are out of time. We have to do it all at once. This should be done because it's right and just, but also because it's smart. The hard truth is, environmentalists can't win the emission reduction fight on our own. It's not a slight against anyone. The lift is just too heavy. This transformation requires a revolution in how we live, work, and consume. It really does change everything. And to win that kind of change, it will take powerful alliances with every arm of the progressive coalition: trade union, migrant rights, indigenous rights, housing rights, transit, teachers, nurses, doctors, ANSI prisons, all of it. In Canada, we brought together a kind of unprecedented coalition of the yes, and we drafted a game plan for getting off fossil fuels in a hurry based on the science that I have been referring to, but putting justice at the center. And we called this document the LEAP Manifesto. And it's based on this premise that to change everything, it takes everyone. To build that kind of coalition, it's got to be about justice: economic justice, racial justice, gender justice, migrant justice, historical justice, not as an afterthought, but as animating principles. And that will only happen if we take real leadership from those most impacted. Not because it's politically correct, but because justice in the here and now is the only thing that has ever motivated popular movements to throw heart and soul into the long struggle. I'm not just talking about going to a march or signing a petition, though we need that too. I'm talking about the sustained, daily, and long hard work of social transformation. It's the thirst for justice, the desperately bodily need for justice that builds movements. We need warriors in this fight, and warriors don't step up against an accumulation of carbon in the atmosphere, not on its own. Warriors step up for clean water, for good schools, for desperately needed decent paying jobs, for fully accessible health care, for the reunification of families separated by war and cruel immigration policies. You already know that there will be no peace without justice. That's the animating principle of the Sydney Peace Foundation. But here's what we need to understand as well: there is no climate action without justice either. Perhaps I should apologize for all this battle talk at a Peace Prize, but we have to be clear that this is a fight, one in need of that warrior spirit. Because as much as humanity has to win in this battle, the fossil fuel companies have a hell of a lot to lose. Trillions in income represented by all that unburnable carbon. Carbon in their current reserves, and in the new reserves, they're spending tens of billions to search out every year. And that's why there is such a powerful fossil fuel divestment movement here in Australia, led by my friends at 350.org, who I want to shout out tonight, because you've won some important victories, including getting the City of Sydney to divest. Congratulations. Maybe our other sponsor, the University of Sydney, will be next. So the fossil fuel companies have a lot to lose, and the politicians have a lot to lose. Campaign donations, sure. The benefit of that revolving door between elected office and the extractive sector. But also the money that comes when you don't have to think or plan, just dig. Right now, Australia is getting windfall profits from exporting coal to China. It's not the only way to fill government coffers, but it's certainly the laziest. No pesky industrial planning, no taxes or royalty increases on the corporations and billionaires with the resources to buy those attack ads. All you have to do is hand out the permits, roll back some environmental laws, put new draconian restrictions on protest, call legitimate court challenges green lawfare, trash the greenies nonstop in the corporate press, and you're good to go. It is this cozy setup that the Indigenous rights and climate justice movements threaten to upend, which is why we shouldn't be surprised by the scathing assessment offered just last month by Michael Forst, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. After a visit to this country, he wrote, "I was astonished to observe mounting evidence of a range of accumulative measures that have levied enormous pressure on Australian civil society. I was astounded to observe what had become frequent public vilification of rights defenders by senior government officials in a seeming attempt to discredit, intimidate, and discourage them from their legitimate work." And he went on. "It is striking that many of the people doing the most crucial work in this country, and we're honored that Gillian Triggs is with us here tonight, protecting the most vulnerable people and defending fragile ecologies from industrial onslaught, are facing this kind of dirty war. And we know all too well that it doesn't take much for this kind of political and media war to turn into a physical war with very real casualties. We see it around the world when land defenders try to stop mines and megadams. It's been 8 months since Berta Cáceres, one of the great environmental and Indigenous rights heroes of our time, was assassinated in her home in Honduras. According to Global Witness, this worldwide, non-metaphorical war is getting worse. They report that more than 3 people were killed a week in 2015, defending their land, forest, and rivers against destructive industries. These numbers are shocking, and 40% of the victims, they estimate, are Indigenous. And let us not tell ourselves that this only happens in poor countries. We are seeing the war for the planet escalate right now in the United States, in North Dakota, where police who looked like they stepped off the battlefield in Fallujah are brutally repressing nonviolent Indigenous movements of water protectors. The Standing Rock Sioux are trying to stop a massive oil pipeline that poses a very real threat to their water supply, that if built would hurtle us towards planet destabilizing warming, more unburnable carbon. For this, these unarmed water protectors, land defenders, have been shot with rubber bullets, sprayed with pepper spray and other gases, blasted with sound cannons, attacked by dogs working for mercenaries, put in what have been described as dog kennels, strip searched and arrested. My fear is that the vilification of land defenders that we're seeing here in Australia, all the various and overlapping attempts at delegitimization layered on top of openly racist portrayals of Indigenous people in the media, coupled with an increasingly draconian security state, prepares the ground for attacks like these. So, though I continue to feel queasy about the carbon I burned on the flight, I'm more than happy to be here, if only to play the role of the confused foreign meddler, saying, hold up a minute. We know where this leads. This is a dangerous path you're going on. This beautiful and beautifully diverse country deserves better. Oh, and this idea that your coal is somehow a humanitarian gift to India's poor, that has to stop too. India is suffering more under coal pollution and the climate change it fuels than almost anywhere on Earth. A few months ago, it was so hot in Delhi that some of the roads melted. Since 2013, more than 4,000 Indians have died in heat waves. This week, they closed all the schools in Delhi because pollution was so thick that they had to declare an emergency. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised by these attempts to package coal as a poverty alleviation program. This is the same gang who market their hellholes on Manus and Nauru as humanitarian programs exclusively designed to save migrants from dying at sea. Such a bunch of do-gooders you have. But you don't need me to tell you all of this clearly. Australia has some of the most incredible climate justice and migrant rights activists in the world, and it is such an honor to be honored by you. One small way of expressing the fact that I know my work rests on the labor and sacrifices of so many others is to redistribute the generous prize money. So Avi and I will be setting up a mechanism to get it to frontline groups, many Indigenous-led, fighting pipelines and megadams, and also building justice-based alternatives. We feel most comfortable doing this in Canada, since that's where our strongest relationships are, and the world is big. We also could really use the money in Canada because a lot of environmental funders are currently under the impression that our Prime Minister is an environmental Adonis and have been slashing their funding. But I do hope that this small gesture inspires others here in Australia to think about how to do more to support Black and Brown climate justice leaders who are on the front lines of both extraction and deep alternatives. I'd like to end my talk tonight with some words from a great man who we lost today. Leonard Cohen, one of the all-time greats in the Tower of Song. Most people didn't know it, but Leonard was passionate about climate justice. And when we drafted the LEAP, we sent it to him, and he was one of the first people to sign it. And he stood by it even when our media called it economy destroying and dangerous and radical. He had no qualms about putting his name to it. His last album, released just a few weeks ago, is a masterwork. It's so good that somehow we all knew it was a parting gift. So I'll leave you with the first verse from Steer Your Way. Steer your way through the ruins of the altar and the mall. Steer your way through the fables of creation and the fall. Steer your way past the palaces that rise above the rot, year by year, month by month, day by day, thought by thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. You are all on notice. And thank you for putting justice at the center of the solution. I gather you all know that Professor Gillian Triggs is the president of the Australian Human Rights Commission, and that the Commission exists to promote and to protect human rights in Australia. Among other things, the Commission investigates and reports on matters like asylum seekers and refugees, age and sex discrimination, and the rights of children. And like Naomi Klein, Professor Trigg's fearless advocacy for human rights is not always appreciated by government. But it is appreciated and should be appreciated by all of us. Professor Triggs will now award the Sydney Peace Prize to Naomi Klein, and right after that, Councillor Jess Scully will say a few words on behalf of the City of Sydney. Would you please welcome Professor Gillian Triggs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. You make me feel I can get to the end of the week somehow. Thank you, Norma, for your welcome to country. And thank you, Pat, for these remarkable words. If we had listened to you and your stories about the sky and the snake and the river and the land, we wouldn't have needed this wonderful Canadian to meddle and tell us what we should know and what we should be doing. So thank you. It's such a privilege to be with you, and we look forward to hearing your voice, Pat, more and more loudly in Senate. Well, I do have the very great honour this evening to present the award. And it's interesting, of course, that the Sydney Peace Prize is the only peace prize, I believe, offered in Australia. And it's a very important one. Naomi is in the company of past winners that include Mary Robinson and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and as she says, Naomi Chomsky, but also our national treasure, who's here tonight, Julian Burnside. And I'd like to begin by reading the words of the Sydney Peace Prize jury, which gives the reason for its selection. Naomi receives the prize for exposing the cultural causes and responsibility for the climate crisis, for inspiring us to stand up locally, nationally, and internationally to promote a new agenda for sharing the planet that respects human rights and equality, and for reminding us of the power of authentic democracy to achieve transformative change and justice. Well, one of the things that I have most admired about tonight and your work, Naomi, is that you have actually linked the environmental concerns of climate change with human rights, with the phrase climate justice. Well, I went to bed last night with this book, This Changes Everything, and I'm quite a fast reader, and I thought, well, I'll just knock it over so I've got a bit of something to say when I come here tonight. Well, an hour later, I just about got through the introduction. This is a most powerful and important book. I've only read the introduction, but what I like about it as a lawyer is that Naomi backs every statement with facts, as you've heard tonight, and I think that is something I really value. Because for me as a lawyer, and I'm sure you tonight, facts matter, evidence matters, and the truth matters. And the United Nations has recognized what Naomi has been telling us. The negative impacts of climate change are disproportionately borne by the persons and the communities already in disadvantageous situations owing to geography, poverty, gender, age, disability, cultural and ethnic background, among others, who have historically contributed the least to greenhouse gas emissions. Well, as an international lawyer, I've always been inspired by that remarkable document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That rather wonderful, if feisty, Australian Doc Evatt in 1948 was the president of the General Assembly when he got through that remarkable document that he'd helped to draft with Eleanor Roosevelt. He got it through the General Assembly with not a single negative vote. And what it did was to recognize the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family as the foundation for freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Under human rights law, we have a right to life, to adequate food, to water, to health, to human security, and rights for our Indigenous peoples. But the great tragedy in Australia is that that vision of Doc Evatt and of others that came in the decades after has now withered away. In Australia, these rights are not part of law. They are not part of our judicial system. They are not recognised by Parliament, and they're derided by our political leaders, or at least some of them. I believe that we need leadership in Australia to advocate for effective policies to ensure that we not only achieve climate justice in our country, but also that we can take a lead in the Pacific to work for those Pacific Island nations that are so dreadfully vulnerable to sea rise and ultimately, of course, will become the next wave of refugees. Well, I don't know whether anyone's told you, Naomi, but we have a wonderful program here in Australia called the Gruen Transfer. And in the Gruen Transfer, we ask, what would Justin do? So we do need some guidance and some ideas. You've told us so much tonight, but the idea that I take away with me is stop the endless taking and start caretaking. So it is my huge privilege to present the Sydney Peace Prize of 2016 to Naomi Klein. And I think it's all for you again. I think they want to say.
Thank you. This means an unspeakable amount to me. Thank you so much, Gillian Triggs, for this honor, for all of your work. Thank you all for being here, and keep up the fight. Thank you.
Wow. Naomi Klein, once again, everyone, that was extraordinary. Thank you, Naomi. I'd like to acknowledge other Sydney Peace Prize laureates, the wonderful Senator Patrick Dodson and Julian Birdside, and of course the wonderful Professor Gillian Triggs. Thank you for standing up for us, and thank you for being a voice for so many of us who believe in a better future. Thank you. I'm here tonight representing another leader in the fight for climate justice, Lord Mayor Clover Moore, who... Thank you. Over the last 12 years, the Lord Mayor has fought to make the City of Sydney a beacon of hope and a beacon of climate change awareness and social justice in what has sadly been a fog of indecision and inaction from Australia. So we are so proud as the City of Sydney to be able to support the Sydney Peace Prize and this lecture tonight. I want to take this moment to thank all of our speakers tonight who are such noble and notable fighters for the issues that affect us all, the values of peace, justice and human rights. These are the values that the Sydney Peace Prize was established to honour, and they're also the values that we believe in here at the City of Sydney. They're the values we want to embody. We have been proud supporters of the Sydney Peace Prize Foundation since its inception almost 20 years ago, and this lecture tonight is a symbol of our partnership. But of course, the prize can't survive on our support alone, which is why I'm so happy that so many of you are here today to help us celebrate the recipient of the 2016 Sydney Peace Prize, Naomi Klein. Thank you, Naomi. It's so significant that the Sydney Peace Prize has recognised these multiple dimensions that climate change wrought. And Naomi is one of the leading voices in the world on climate justice and economic fairness. She's an astute analyst of the global economic system, and she's so imaginative in finding ways that it can be fairer and more sustainable. And, you know, as Gillian said, she actually finds these incredible examples from all over the world that really show us that people are being creative, that they're bringing their own solutions to these intersectional problems of climate change and social justice. Naomi's message is so timely for Australia. Unfortunately, you know, for many, many years, we thought we were the land of the fair go, and we were so proud of that idea of mateship, of the idea that we lived in an equal society, but sadly that's increasingly under threat. Just last month, a report by the Community Council of Australia showed a society that's plagued by rising inequality, a rising suicide rate, and above average rates of incarceration and carbon emissions. As Naomi Klein talked about the black test, we are sadly failing it in Australia. In the Northern Territory in particular, imprisonment rates are actually higher than in the United States. As the Council's Chief Executive David Crosbie noted, incarceration rates are like the canary in the coal mine. They tell you how your most vulnerable are being treated. Equally, Naomi's message on climate change could not be more timely. We know the effects of climate change are already being felt, most acutely in some of the poorest countries in the world, including a few small island states very close to us. You know, the Eastern Low just a few weeks ago, which devastated coastlines much closer to home. Then there's the November bushfires, which are becoming a regular occurrence. These are all signs that the effects are being felt, that things are changing, and that this has to change everything. This can be our great opportunity, as Naomi Klein has pointed out. This is our opportunity to remake the world as a better and fairer place. And that message has galvanised thousands of people across Australia and across the world. This is a message that the City of Sydney has been working to deliver since 2004, and one that many of our residents, businesses and other organisations have encouraged us to continue. It's something we believe in. It's the basis of so many of the decisions that we make here at the City. It's wonderful to work for an organisation where we focus on the extremely local and the extremely global, because those two things are intimately connected. It's really significant that the Sydney Peace Prize has recognised the multiple dimensions of climate change issue, that extreme weather has killed more than 500,000 people and caused $3 trillion in damages over the past 2 decades alone, and we know there's only more to come. Droughts, floods, fires, they destroy livelihoods, they displace people, and they're at the root of violence and suffering around the world. If we want peace with justice, we cannot ignore climate change. Now, I'm here on behalf of the City to give our thanks to Naomi Klein for her address tonight, but I couldn't stand up here in good conscience and not give thanks on behalf of my generation as well. You know, No Logo was published the year that I turned 20, and you know, your words from Toronto echoed all the way to Ultimo. Which is just down the road. And for so many of us who were just getting into social change movements, who were starting to see the globalisation movement that you described coming to quite horrific life in front of us, it was unlike anything we'd read before. You know, it was someone who saw the world that we saw and had the capacity to articulate it, who was out there on the front lines, even though you're only 10 years older than we were. You were out there on the front lines, you were hearing those stories, you were gathering the evidence, you were reporting it back. That made a huge amount of difference for us. And not only that, you came back despite everything you'd seen with tremendous optimism. And you told us about people who were being creative, who were working with their communities, and who were developing their own strategies for change, their own networks, their own systems to reshape the world in the way that we feel that it could be shaped. So it's so wonderful that someone who was a transformative force then for a generation continues to be a transformative force now, moving on to the greatest challenge of our times. So I'd like to thank all the laureates, and particularly Naomi Klein, on behalf of the city for all of their work on these causes. And thank you for opening our eyes and our hearts to these big issues. Thank you.
On behalf of the Peace Foundation, I want to express my gratitude to the City of Sydney as our major sponsor. And as you've heard, the values that we promote, peace with justice, respect for human rights, and the language and practice of nonviolence, these are the core progressive values of civil society. Although they are extremely important, this will shock you. We actually do not get any funding from government. Truly, we don't. We rely on the community for support, and if you believe in what we believe in, and if you want to see more Sydney Peace Prize lectures, please support us. There are details on how you can do so on the programs that are left on your chairs. And now the audio-visual surprise. The Marshall Islands are some of those Pacific islands that are suffering the impact of rising seas. Kathy Jetnil-Kittier is a poet and climate activist from the Marshall Islands, and she wrote a poem called Dear Matafale Penem. That poem was made into a video, and that video opened the United Nations Climate Summit in Paris in 2015. With Kathy Jetnil-Kittier's permission, and with her best wishes to the citizens of Sydney, we're going to play that video for you in just a moment. Immediately after the video, Missy Higgins will return to play a final song to close this evening's program. Those of you who are going to be joining us for dinner at the Hilton Hotel, exit that way, cross George Street, turn left, walk half a block to the Hilton, and take the escalator up to the second level. For the rest of you, thank you all for coming this evening. I hope you have had an inspiring night out. And we hope to see you again next year when we will be celebrating the 20th year of the Sydney Peace Prize. Thank you all and good night.
Dear Matafele Benum, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as the Buddha. Your thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matafele Benum, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day, that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of your seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matafele Benum, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas, no backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals, no blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. Because baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, dimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and floods of Pakistan, Algeria, and Colombia, and hurricanes, tidal waves, and earthquakes didn't exist, still, there are those who see us. Hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing. We are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street, marching with signs, hand in hand, chanting for change now. They're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us. Because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Mata Filipinum, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes, baby, and sleep in peace. Because we won't let you down. You'll see.
She's holding a torch in her hand, pointing towards heaven. And on the streets below her, people living out of trash cans and trying to believe she's got a plan. We dug a hole under the sea. Now nobody knows how to stop the bleed. There's 999 channels on my TV, and I still have no idea what to believe. But there is a choice. You can follow the leader or use your voice, 'cause this'll just keep up until we make a loud noise and the hidden ones speak up. Over the water to the east, 2 million in a square refuse to sleep, till every pleading voice is heard and all the world has seen a revolution pull a king down to his knees. 'Cause they made a choice not to follow the leader, but use one voice. Shows ordinary people can make a really loud noise when the hidden ones speak up. into his jeans, now he's a gun. And the stories of his ancestors, they will never be sung, 'cause he is going where they do not see the sun. Ah, but look, there's a circus in town. Watch as the lion eats the clown. Tell me who out there is leading on the ground. Who will catch the boy before he drowns? If they're busy putting shows on for the crowd. Oh, but there is a choice. You can follow the leader or use your voice, 'cause this'll just keep up till we make a loud noise and the hidden ones speak up. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.